Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to, I think it's our 12th, it's either our
11th.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our 11th Real Business of Wine session, webcast, and indeed video and podcast. And they're all been different, and this one's yet again different. And we're going to be looking at the question of natural wine. And this is the extraordinary thing about natural wine over the last 5 years, let's say 3 to 5 years. It's just how much coverage it's had, how much debate there's been. I don't think there's a single region or brand in the world that's had as much coverage. And of all the people who've been associated with that coverage, nobody's had more of that space than Alice Feiring. We're delighted to have with us tonight. We have Simon Wolf, who is I think we'll say a natural wine fan, and also most specifically, the author of a book on orange wines. And Simon and I actually had an interesting day going around the Raw Wine Fair together a few years ago. On the screen, you'll see Emma Bentley, who is very kindly chipping in, and she is going to be translating for the person whose face you can't see there, I'm afraid, because we had a problem with his camera, which is Jacques Carroguet, who is producer in the Loire, and he is a natural wine producer who has been behind the recent move, which has taken about 10 years, I think, to get regulations for natural wine. So today we're not necessarily talking about the good or the bad of natural wine and whether it should exist or shouldn't exist or any of those sort of things. That's been covered very widely elsewhere. We're going to look particularly to start with at whether or not natural wine should be defined legally in the way that organic wine, biodynamic wine, even sustainable wine have legal definitions. They may vary from place to place, but they're legally defined. At the moment, there are very few legal definitions for natural wines. And in fact, I have a screen that I'd like to show you briefly, if I may, which gives you an idea of the range of different versions of natural wines. We have one of our attendees very kindly, Polly, who's the person who sent this in, please?
Oh, you've put me on the spot.
Barbera,
yes.
I think. This little chart, which you can't see in detail, but I'll put it up later on. Those are the differences between the rules for natural wines. And in fact, you'll see that you can see between up to 70 milligrams of sulfur for the Raw Wine Fair, 80 to 100 for Vini Veri, minimum quantities for AAA, Renaissance, 100 to 150. And then for the Vin Méthode Nature, the new French model that Jack's involved with, is 30 milligrams. There's a lot of differences across the definitions of what is natural wine. Should it be defined? Should it not? And I'd like to kick this off because I don't actually know how you feel about this, Alice. How do you think? Do you think there should be any kind of set of rules for what natural wine is?
Well, first of all, hi guys. Before I go into my belief about definition or rules or any legality, those are not rules for natural wine, but those are guidelines for various organizations. Yes. And so there aren't rules. So obviously Isabelle went from no sulfites to up to 70, and it's a different sort of thing. I've been on record saying I'm a bit of an anarchist. I don't really see the need, or I haven't seen the need for any sort of legislation about natural wine, but of course that was before natural wine became something that was worthy of imitation. And so I think that this is what the impetus coming out of France was about, is to try to allow the person shopping in the supermarket to know actually what they're getting and to have complete transparency. So I think it is unavoidable as we go forward to avoid any sort of legislation on it, and how that's going to happen still remains to be seen. I think that what is going on with this 12-point system of wines by nature isn't necessarily legislation. It's a step in a direction to be seen what will happen. So I don't know, I'm probably pretty vague as always about it.
I think that's
in my heart of hearts, I don't love it.
It's a very good start, and I think I'm going to introduce Jacques, because I think Jacques' move was particularly, it's been acknowledged by the French INAO, but I believe that there was a bit of a piece of research by a magazine, a consumer magazine, which found that so-called natural wines in France were not even made from organic grapes.
Exactly.
I think that was one of the questions.
Mm-hmm.
Jacques, est-ce que vous pouvez décrire, je vais traduire après que vous l'ayez fait, décrire un peu les démarches que vous avez faites et qui vous ont, les raisons pour lesquelles vous avez décidé qu'il faut avoir des règlements sur les vins naturels. Jacques.
Oui. Merci de me donner la parole. Nous avons
excusez-moi, ça vaut la peine que vous vous décrivez au début. Vous êtes vigneron naturel depuis combien d'années?
Oui, d'accord. Moi, je suis vigneron. On a commencé à faire du vin nature en 2000.
Eh bien, sorry, I'll translate. Je vais traduire. Monsieur Carré has been making natural wines since 2000.
Alors, on a commencé à être en bio en 97. Et puis, on est passé tout en nature en 2006.
So sorry, he was 97 organic and in 2006 went natural.
Voilà. Alors, moi, j'ai participé à l'AVN, à l'Association des vins nature. J'en étais administrateur.
So he was in the administrator of the Association of Natural Wines.
Et puis, j'ai quitté l'AVN, voilà, pour des raisons...
And he left the association for reasons that he hasn't specified.
Peu importe. Et disons que c'est Antonin, un journaliste, qui, dans le cadre d'un salon qui s'était sous les pavés de la vigne à la Bellevilloise à Paris.
And there was an exhibition in Paris.
Qui a réuni Eric Morin, un avocat français.
Brought together a French lawyer.
Gilles Azoni, un vigneron nature bien connu.
And Mr. Azoni, a very well-known natural winemaker.
Sébastien David, qui est aussi vigneron bien connu.
Sébastien David, another well-known winemaker.
Et puis Christelle Pinault, qui est anthropologue et qui a fait un livre sur la biodynamie.
And Christopher Pinault, who's done a book on biodynamic wines.
Et lors de cette petite réunion à la Bellevilloise, en public, disons que nous avons ressenti absolument le besoin que les vignerons donnent un engagement.
So this meeting, they decided amongst themselves, as a public meeting, that there was a public engagement by the vignerons about natural wines.
Pourquoi est-ce que nous avons ressenti cette nécessité? Parce qu'il y avait eu une étude sur 34 vins nature, des analyses de 34 vins nature dans un journal de l'Union des consommateurs français.
Because there'd been a study of 34 wines in the magazine of the French Union of Consumers.
Et dans ces 34 vins, il y avait 2 vins qui n'étaient pas issus de raisins biologiques et dont on pouvait être certain que c'était intentionnel.
So there were two wines out of the 34 that definitely were not grown from organic grapes, and there was no question that there was no accident involved, that these were intentionally used and they were not organic.
Je sais que c'est un débat, le fait d'être en bio, mais néanmoins, je ne peux pas concevoir, et nous ne pouvions pas concevoir, les 6 personnes autour de la table, que des vins nature aient des résidus de pesticides issus de la chimie de synthèse.
So he said, I know that being organic or not is debatable, but we, the 6 of us around the table, decided that it was not reasonable, it could not be accepted for a natural wine to not be made from organic grapes. And the fact that these grapes had the residue of chemical sprays meant that they should not have been used in a natural wine.
Dans ces vignerons, il y avait un vigneron très célèbre.
Amongst the growers, there was a very well-known grower, very well-known producer.
Et Gilles Azoni a précisé qu'il n'était pas à son coup d'essai. C'est-à-dire que 10 ans auparavant, il avait déjà fait des vins dits nature avec des raisins conventionnels.
And Mr. Azoni said that there had been other occasions where this producer had produced wines that were not made from organic grapes.
Donc nous avons eu le besoin suite à cette réunion de faire une définition.
So after this meeting, we had to have a definition.
Et une définition qui, telle qu'elle a été écrite, reprend à la louche tout ce qui a pu être dit depuis 15 ans sur les vins nature. C'est-à-dire, c'est pas nous qui avons défini le vin nature. Le vin nature s'est défini au fur et à mesure. Je vous laisse traduire.
So he said that basically what this definition that they came up with was not something, well, they didn't come up with it. It was based on 15 years of experience by natural wine producers before that.
Il y avait une définition des vins sains. Il y a toujours une définition des vins sains. Il y a une définition de l'AVN.
There had been other definitions.
Il y a une définition qui a été faite par l'INAO, le rapport CAV, en lien avec l'association de l'AVN. Disons, on n'a pas, c'est pas nous qui avons créé cette définition, c'est la reprise de ce que historiquement les choses avaient déjà été pensées.
So it was taken from a number of things that other people have been saying, including the INEO and others across the years. So, merci Jacques. Je vais passer la parole à Simon Wolf, que vous connaissez peut-être, qui est là à côté de vous. Simon, there aren't any definitions for orange wines, as far as I'm aware, in terms of legal definitions. How do you feel about definitions in general?
Definitions are always difficult, and one of the biggest problems is that we can all sit here and agree on what defines a natural wine or an orange wine or anything else, but actually winemakers are often blurring these lines, and the winemaking is not black or white. But I do think that it can be quite important to have some kind of regulation along the way, because if you are doing something which is a bit off-piste, or if you occupy a niche space, then you're bound to be challenged at some point. And we've seen a lot of that with natural wine. We've seen a lot of people in the wine industry challenge and say, well, it's ridiculous, you can't even define what you're doing, so how can we take you seriously? Or nothing's to stop you putting a wine on the market and saying it's a natural wine. There's no rules, there's regulations, complete rubbish. So the only way to counter that, in my view, is to have some kind of standard, is to have some kind of set of definitions or rules that people adhere to. Of course, with the initiative that Jacques has taken, this is not going to be the entire wine industry. This is a collection of French winemakers at the moment, but I think it's a start, and I think it's important that if you are a winemaker in the natural space and you want to self-certify, if you want to say to people, I am doing what I said I was doing, there's no flies on me, and here's the proof, I think it's important that there's a mechanism that allows you to do that. And we've seen this happen with organic and biodynamic viticulture. We've seen that there are growers who really take this seriously, and they want to be able to substantiate what they're doing. They're proud of what they're doing. They want you to know that they're doing what they say they're doing. So let's have the same possibilities in natural wine. So I personally think this is an important initiative.
So Simon, I'd like to also thank you for a post that you did earlier today on the Morning Claret, which I think you could put the address on the chat so people can see it. And these are the rules, picking up from your post, that I understand that there are in Jacques' charter and the charter that has been accepted by the INAO. So basically the grapes have to be organic, manual harvesting, no yeast. And somebody was asking about whether racking and filtering, racking I think is allowed, but filtering and fining are not allowed.
Filtering is allowed.
Sorry?
A tiny bit of filtering is allowed.
In the charter?
Yeah.
Okay.
A very small, large micron filtration.
Okay, so basically, but no significant, I suppose you'd say, fining, filtering,
Right.
no fining.
No fining.
And also no thermovinification, reverse osmosis, anything that you would be using in terms of what you could call industrial winemaking are not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the questions that is, I think, controversial, inevitably on natural wines is sulfur, because we have obviously organic wine in America is in theory zero sulfur, unless it's organically grown grapes. And if you look at the chart that I threw up earlier, as I was saying, that the levels of accepted sulfur vary hugely. Now this one, I think, and you looked at this, Simon, is less than 30 grams of the finished wine. So whatever's come out of fermentation, plus whatever's been added, you shouldn't have more than 30. Is that
actually
correct?
I'd want to, and maybe you should ask Jacques as well,
Yes.
but it's about additions. It's about additions, and that's different.
Jacques, est-ce que je peux vous demander sur la question de SO2, qu'est-ce que c'est sur la charte, comment est-ce que vous voyez, qu'est-ce qui est permis en tant que SO2? Jacques? Qu'est-ce qui est permis? Je vois 30 grammes, 30 milligrammes, pardon. Qu'est-ce qui est permis en tant que...
Ce qui est permis, c'est-à-dire que, disons, on a acté deux catégories.
So there are two categories.
Yeah,
of
two
wine.
categories, but
les vins sans sulfite ajouté
Wines with no sulfur added.
et les
If
vins
you look at
avec
my head, you can
un
actually see
léger
the one.
sulfitage à la mise.
Pardon, vous pouvez répéter s'il vous plaît, Jacques?
Et les vins avec un léger sulfitage à la mise.
And the wines with a light, what he's calling a léger, light sulfur addition at the bottling.
Les vignerons, un certain nombre de vignerons ont des vins qui sont naturellement au-dessus de 10 mg.
There are wines, we've got wines with a level of lower than 10 milligrams naturally.
Et ça fait l'objet d'un long débat à l'intérieur du syndicat.
And there was a long debate within the union.
Et nous avons tranché de la manière suivante. Il y a les vins sans sulfite ajouté et les vins dans lesquels on rajoute des sulfites.
So there are two categories. There are wines with zero added and wines to which some has been added.
Et par contre, la législation sur lequel on est obligé de marquer contient des sulfites, c'est 10 mg, et là, elle s'applique. Alors moi, en général, chez moi...
So basically, sorry, pardon, Jacques, according to the law, you actually, where you have to put on your label contains sulfites, that 10 milligrams is the threshold.
But my point before was that, sorry, Jacques, is that it wasn't about total sulfites, but about added sulfites, because a lot of times you can add 60 parts and then only come up with 30 total.
Yeah,
so it's just about additions, and it's a very important clarification.
Et vous voulez que je traduise ou vous avez la traduction de Emma là?
Oui, mais c'est total. C'est le total.
Well, total.
Total, c'est 30.
No, total.
C'est 30.
He is saying it is 30. The idea is that the final figure is 30, I think.
No.
I asked Jack to confirm this yesterday. We had a conversation, and sorry, Jack, because my French isn't good enough to communicate directly, but he did confirm that the intention is that it means 30 milligrams total in the finished wine, which was not
I had a different
clear.
thing from I had a different thing from Sebastian.
No,
yeah, it's. I have to say it's expressed rather confusingly in the chart.
And it does say, putting in. So you're putting in at the end, and that is before analysis, or that's that is going to be what is going to be on your chart as added.
I think what Jacques, quand vous, je crois que c'est important de préciser, quand vous dites 30 mg, c'est quand on contrôle le vin déjà en bouteille, qu'est-ce qu'on va trouver en tant que SO2. Yes. So,
Bien
so basically, Alice, no, it is once
No.
the wine has been bottled, when you
Yeah.
analyze the bottled wine, there is a maximum of 30 milligrams in the wine.
So you're allowed to add more than 30 milligrams per parts per million?
Well, it's basically the final wine will only have 30. That's a very simple, it's a very simple, clear rule, I would have thought.
Mm.
But I think
Not
just
so
to,
clear.
I think what's important about this, if I understand, and apologies if I misunderstood the French at all, but is it because the charter says that you may not sulfur until after fermentation. So therefore, any sulfur that you do add is not going to disappear
Exactly.
by the time you bottle and do the analysis.
Right.
So if the rule is that the finished wine must have 30, I mean, this is also in line with the AVN rules, I think. So it's becoming reasonably
But if you're not
standard.
doing the analysis, and this is, we're probably really getting, it's actually an important part, but then your total might actually be more.
I don't see how if you've added it after.
Because sometimes you generate 18 ppm, or sometimes people have 40 total naturally.
Yes, but if you've added more.
Without adding anything.
Yes, but if you've added more, you're going to end up with more than 30 at the end.
Right, that's my point.
Okay, so I think let's move on from here.
Okay, let's go on.
But I think it is an important area. I personally think I understand it, but I can understand why other people can't. We have in the audience a number of very keen people who are interested in it. And I think we have Eric Asimov. There I saw Eric's name appearing earlier, who might want to say a word. We have Isabelle Legeron as well. Actually, I'm going to bring in Isabelle for a second, because Isabelle, you have to make this decision as to what is a natural wine for your raw wine fairs, don't you? Can you hear me? Can we see Isabelle?
Yeah, I can hear you, yes.
Thank you.
So yeah, I just wanted to point out that, you know, raw wine is not a natural wine event. You know, within the fair, we have growers who are natural and who do not add any sulfites whatsoever. And then I also have growers who will add a certain amount, and the total that they can have is up to 70 parts per million in the finished wine. So you know, I really don't want to be confusing the issues here anymore.
But can I ask you then two questions? One is, do you have in your mind, if you say that not all the wines at the Raw Wine Fair are necessarily natural, what is your definition of a natural wine in terms of sulfur?
For me, very simply, a natural wine has always been a wine that hasn't seen any addition.
So zero for you. Basically
zero added. Yeah, zero addition. And I think also what's challenging is, you know, when we talk about, you know, that in this charter, that the total sulfite will be, you know, has to be, you know, below 30 ppm at bottling. So, but how, for me, one of the challenges is how do you actually monitor, or how do you know that the sulfites haven't been added on the grapes, on the must, before malo, after malo? You know, it's quite a complex. You know, I mean, I really welcome this move, and I think it's really brilliant, because I really believe we have to have a definition, because it really helps. But of course, I think, you know, there's always challenges with trying to regulate something like this, and these would be my questions, because this is something that we come across all the time when we ask specifically, when did you add the sulfites, but how do you actually prove that the sulfites were added at a particular time, I guess.
Thank you, Isabelle. Thank you very much. Do you want to pick up on that at all, Alice? Or I was going to invite Eric Asimov to have a word here.
Well, about which part? Because I'm in most agreement with Isabelle on that. Okay.
Eric, I'm going to see, I hope you're there. Eric was with us talking about wine writing 2 nights ago.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Eric. We can't see you, but we can hear you. Now, you said when we had you and Tim Atkin and Elaine Trickham-Brown, you made the point that you didn't really think that there's a need for rules, didn't you?
No, I'm open to being persuaded, but you know, I think you can tell from this discussion the difficulties at A, arriving at a definition, and B, having a definition be meaningful to anybody in the public. In general, it seems to me that once you define something, you open the way for change and co-optation. That's happened with definitions for organic in the US. I think that as long as the term natural wine is used as an ideal, as a connotation or a signifier, it has a lot more power than it does as some sort of rigidly defined method for making wine.
Ouais. Je pourrais intervenir.
Oui,
Oui,
allez-y.
Robert, je pourrais intervenir là. Je trouve que c'est intéressant la discussion. Deux choses d'abord.
Two things to say.
La définition que nous avons faite, trois choses. A pour but de protéger les vignerons nature.
What we wanted to do was to protect the natural wine producers.
Parce qu'il y a quand même maintenant sur le marché des choses qui, je vous ai parlé des raisins conventionnels, mais il y a pire.
There are things on the market. There are worse examples than wines made from non-organic grapes.
Et donc, ce sont plutôt les industriels qui seraient les bénéficiaires de cet engouement, de cette chose dans laquelle on a fait, effectivement, en étant chacun enfin, où chaque personnalité a pu s'imprimer.
So there are industrial producers who are actually carpetbagging into the sector.
Voilà, ça c'est la première chose. Pour la deuxième chose, concernant les sulfites, moi j'étais partisan d'une définition à 10 mg.
So Jacques he personally wanted a 10 milligram definition.
Maintenant, ça éliminait un certain nombre de vins qui sont sans sulfite ajouté et qui dépassent les 10 mg.
But the problem with this was that there are wines, as Alice was saying earlier, that even with no added sulfur, come over the 10 milligram level.
Et ça éliminait un certain nombre de vignerons qui sont au début de leur carrière ou même et qui, pour des raisons X ou Y, mettent un peu de sulfite à la mise.
And this also, attends une seconde, s'il te plaît, Jacques. This also cut out some growers who either at the beginning of their career, or people beginning with natural wines, or people who added a very small amount at the time of bottling.
Et j'admets bien que c'est difficile de savoir quand est-ce que ça a été mis.
He admits that it's very difficult to know when sulfur has been added.
Mais dans notre esprit, la définition du vin nature, c'est uniquement à la mise. Sinon,
so for
on
us,
intervient.
The concept of natural wine is that it is only added at the time of bottling.
Voilà. Après, c'est clair que c'est difficile de se mettre tous d'accord sur une définition.
It's clear that it's very hard to get everyone to agree on a definition.
Je vous invite à adhérer à notre syndicat.
I invite people to actually join our syndicate, our union.
Et s'il y a effectivement des points qui vous semblent à changer et tout, je crois qu'on est vraiment prêt au débat, quoi. Voilà,
so basically, it's open to the debate if anybody would like to change that. Merci, Jacques.
Mais comme
voilà. Allez-y.
Non, c'est bon.
Bien, merci. Emma, who is, I think, doing the translations, I hope, for Jacques in the background wonderfully. Emma has got a question of her own. Emma, would you like to ask your question?
Hello. So yeah, my question was actually, one thing is us talking about the definitions, because as even Eric Asimov, I agree with him, it's very difficult to get everyone to agree. The next point that I just put in the group chat is that once you've put together a definition, that's only half of the battle, because the next half is actually making sure that people are doing what they say they're doing and that they're respecting that definition. Do you accept auto-certification so that people do a note of honor saying, I swear I do? or do you get external inspectors to come in which case that's even more controversial in the natural wine world?
So I guess you're translating that for Jacques, as we say at the moment.
Yep,
I mean,
I'll just do that.
While you're doing that, I would say that the whole point of the biodynamic and the organic certification is that people do come in and check what you're doing. It isn't self-certified. Whereas the sustainable model in many places is self-certified, but there's an argument that sustainable hasn't actually worked as a label nearly as well as organic or biodynamic for that very reason. Jacques, vous voulez répondre
oui.
À la question que Emma vient de poser?
Oui, sur la certification.
Oui. Donc, est-ce qu'il faut des inspecteurs?
Eh bien, c'est-à-dire que nous... oui, c'est la certification. Pour le label, comment dire, ou pour la marque syndicat Vin Nature.
Oui.
Oui. Eh bien non, nous, ce qu'on a décidé, c'est que il fallait, la nature humaine étant ce qu'elle est, quelques vérifications.
So the human nature being what it is, we need some verifications.
Mm-hmm.
Et on a décidé que ce serait sur le hasard strict.
And it was done totally at random.
Qu'on choisirait un certain nombre de cuvées dont le vin serait analysé et dont on pourrait voir la traçabilité, puisque de toute façon, dans le métier du vin, toute la traçabilité est déjà faite d'avance. Vous ne pouvez pas vendre de vin sans qu'il y ait déjà un tas de paperasses. Donc, on n'a pas su rajouter les paperasses.
So they would randomly, attendez une seconde, s'il vous plaît. They would randomly choose batches of wine per producer and actually do tests on those and do the traceability of that wine, which we have to do anyway these days.
Donc, il est évident qu'il faudra vérifier sur ces cuvées choisies, et on avait pris le chiffre de 1%.
So they've taken the view that they would do 1%, they would actually do a test on 1%.
Cette année, on va en faire 3, je pense, sur une centaine de cuvées, donc on sera à 3%.
So they'll do 3% this year, they'll do 3 out of 100 cuvées. Excusez-moi, Jacques, sur 100 caves ou 100 cuvées?
100 cuvées.
So they're going to do 3 tests on 100 cuvées, so 100 vats. So that's obviously going to be a smaller number of producers.
Ouais.
Donc il y a moins de 100 producteurs à ce moment-là.
Il y a moins de 100 producteurs pour cette année, mais l'année prochaine, il y aura plus. On est au tout début. Il y a 200 adhérents, 250 adhérents en ce moment, mais pas que des producteurs.
So there are 200 members of the syndicat, but they're not all producers and they're just beginning. So to start with, it will be on vats rather than on batches of wine rather than cellars. Voilà. Merci.
Donc,
allez-y.
Non, mais juste dire pour que c'est pas, on ne surajoute pas de paperasserie, d'inspecteurs, de choses comme ça. Seulement, il y a des cuvées qui seront prises au hasard et qu'on fera analyser. Et effectivement, on vérifiera pour ces cuvées s'il y a des vendanges manuelles. Il suffit que les gens payent des vendangeurs, hein, voilà. Et ça s'arrête à ça. Voilà.
Okay, so they can check the contents of they can analyze the contents of the vat, and they know whether the producer has paid for pickers or not, and so on. Alice, would you like to chip in here?
Yeah, I've got actually a question, a statement. And one thing that I think that this is so positive is that natural wine has been recognized, whether or not you believe in legislation or definition or certification. It is now recognized in Europe, which there have been natural wine deniers. So now we're on board. It exists. This is a positive. It is my hope that this will go further, that those people who choose to have to belong to the association, because it's completely voluntary, you can make a natural wine and not have the label, that maybe when people go up to get their appellation, the wine may be judged on slightly different standards that might be more lenient if it isn't a cookie cutter to the appellation. So this started out of, I believe it the organization started when Sébastien David it was declared he had to destroy his 2016 Coff. And I think this label will provide some protection for maybe that not happening. This is complicated. Emma, could you somehow put that to Jacques to find out whether he thinks it's going to make a difference?
While you're doing that, I'm going to ask Felicity Carter, who's got a comment, to add her thought to it while we're waiting for Jacques to get that information. Felicity, would you like to put the question that you've raised, please?
It's really a two-part question. I think Eric is right. We've seen natural wines beginning to emerge in supermarkets across the continent in the UK. Once you certify it and you give a roadmap to how natural wine needs to be made, you are going to find big industrial producers who are making wine according to this. Now, they have to obviously follow the rules with organic and manually picked and so on, but many of the big producers can actually do this. Is this a good or a bad thing? But since I believe that natural wine really has an artisanal ethos, is it good that industrial winemakers will have to make wine this way and provide consumers with a real choice? Or is it bad because you do run the risk of smashing that artisanal framework?
Thank you very much. Jacques, vous avez la question là, que Alice vous a posée. Est-ce que vous avez une réponse à ce que Alice a dit?
Alors, effectivement, les vins nature sont possibles soit dans les appellations d'origine contrôlée, soit dans les IGP, les vins de pays.
So you could actually have, you can have natural wines within appellations or within IGP, vins de pays.
Il y a déjà des membres de syndicats, et je pense par exemple au Pic Saint-Loup, qui veulent faire évoluer les syndicats de dégustation.
So in Pic Saint-Loup, and there are a few other appellations where they want to, as I said, evolve the tasting commissions that decide whether a wine fits within the appellation or not.
Nous aurons déjà une discussion avec les fraudes, le DGCRF.
So they've already got discussing with the French Repression des Fraudes, whose job it is to stop people breaking the laws.
Pour élargir leur capacité de dégustation, qui puissent intégrer beaucoup plus de vin que ce qu'ils font maintenant, puisqu'ils peuvent envoyer à la distillerie des vins sur des fautes de goût. Et on veut absolument faire que les vignerons aient la liberté de créer le goût qu'ils ont envie.
So that's an interesting question. Basically, they want the tasting commissions within the appellations to have a broader range of acceptance, and so allowing the producers to actually produce what Jacques says is the flavors they want, which obviously would involve potentially wines with higher levels of volatile acidity, I'm adding, and maybe other aspects as well.
Comment dire, ça, c'est possible que s'il y a des gens sur le terrain et qui travaillent au niveau de chaque organisme de défense de chaque appellation.
So this is going to work at the level of each appellation, so it will vary from place to place. Okay, thank you. And Emma, did you get a chance to translate the question about industrial, larger producers getting involved?
Felicity's question, unfortunately not. No, but I'm doing it now.
Okay, thank you. I'll carry on with this for a second. I think that's going to be an interesting area because that also moves us into what I could say, the vexed area, inevitably, of quote unquote faults. Ranging from what I think, Simon, you said in your piece this morning that you're very sensitive to mousiness. And I recall you, Alice, actually saying that I think you've said that you may be tolerant towards Brett or VA on some wines in some ways, but mousiness is not something.
Yeah, there's a mouse in back of me, actually. That is a mouse.
Exactly, and so you're not you don't accept mousiness.
No, but even there is difference in mouse. There's some mouse that will absolutely go away, and there's mouse that never goes away. So it's like it's you know.
But within a tasting commission, within an appellation, do you think that they should be tasting a wine that at the point that they're tasting it, if it tastes mousy at that point, do you think that that's something that they should be saying, okay, we'll allow it in the hope that it's going to go away?
Absolutely not. I'm against tasting panels.
Okay.
I don't think there's any way to say this is typicity of this area, or because that changes, you know, like you can have some broad identify, but if you're farming well and you're making wine according to your philosophy and you're making an honest wine, you're making a wine in an appellation, I think as long as you're doing the work, you should get it. And if you have a label like this is enough to warn a consumer that maybe you're getting something, you could be getting a little something atypical. You know, if something is not respecting, if production methods, perhaps going into the bottle and going out of the market too soon, that may be a different story. But
I've got a note from Adam Vignola, who I will quote rather than getting him on board. But he said, I thought drinking wine is just a sensory experience. The idea that wine must meet a definition seems antithetical to the role of wine in our culture. Wine having a place at the table. Now Merriam-Webster, the dictionary publisher, is involved. It seems a bit snobbish, which is, I think, tying in a little bit with what you're saying in some ways, Alice, but also not in others. And obviously the French model is that an appellation wine is supposed to taste recognizably of that place, which is why you have the tasting commissions. I have big questions over those tasting commissions.
But when did the
myself.
tasting commissions come in? When the original appellations were set up, it was not about meeting a certain taste. It was about farming and methodology and the vinification,
I
and
beg
the élevage.
to differ, Alice.
I'm asking that sort of a question.
No, I beg to differ. Basically, initially it was places like Châteauneuf-du-Pape, specifically Nuits-Saint-Georges, a few key appellations whose wines were being, whose names, their wines were being purloined by other producers. And from the very beginning, what they wanted to say was that if you bought something that said Châteauneuf-du-Pape, it tasted like Châteauneuf-du-Pape. It wasn't something that somebody had chosen to call Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And in those days, they weren't as bothered about levels of sulfur and those sort of things as they were about its recognizability, not necessarily even its quality, but it was supposed to be. And that's where most wine education, to be fair, WSET, MW, and everything else.
Well, we're talking about the 60s, the 50s and 60s, not before then, and appellation started in the 30s. So back in the 30s, were there, and this I actually don't know, but I don't recall reading about any flavor profile.
As far as I'm aware, it was. Jacques, le début des appellations en France, est-ce que la typicité des appellations, est-ce que ça faisait partie du jeu pendant les années 30, au début des années...
Non, non, absolument. Non. Les appellations d'origine, comme son nom l'indique, ça donne l'origine d'un vin. Et c'est après qu'il y a eu une espèce de mainmise de certains acteurs pour que l'appellation devienne le vin que eux ils étaient capables de faire.
Okay, so Jacques is actually agreeing with you, Alice. I'm still going to take my own view on this, that he's saying originally it guaranteed where the wine came from, but it was not guaranteeing the style. And he said later on, some, what he calls actors, stepped in to ensure that the wine tasted the way their wines tasted. I'm going to, we'll come back on this on another occasion. I think I do see it differently, but I think it's an interesting point.
Il y a juste une chose, les dégustations avaient pour but aussi d'éliminer certaines maladies du vin. Je pense au goût de croupi, je pense à un certain nombre de vins qu'on peut considérer comme malades.
So the other point of those tastings was also to cut out wines that had natural faults, which would have been various faults, cloudiness, whatever. Yeah.
Right.
Simon, you've been quiet for a minute here. Would you like to chip in a thought on this? How do you feel? Do you think that when you buy a wine that says Châteauneuf-du-Pape or indeed a small Burgundy village, should it be tightly controlled at some point that you say this actually tastes like Meursault rather than Pouligny-Montrachet rather than Chassagne-Montrachet or whatever region we're talking about?
Yeah, very difficult question. I have to say I'm I'm fairly allied with Alice on this one. I do think a lot of what we see as appellation characteristics are actually invented concepts. And absolutely, as Alice says, a lot of these ideas. I mean, for example, if you look at the profile, you said Merceau, Poulinement Haché. You know, a lot of the profiles of those wines are to do with what you do in the cellar with your barrels. These are modern concepts. They have nothing to do with what's going on in the vineyard. So I do think it's a difficult question. I do think, to a certain extent, we all crave wines which have some kind of regional typicity. It's an important concept, but the challenge is that what we perceive as regional typicity is often manufactured and actually,
like no.
And a perfect example of this, just
Chateauneuf actually is a perfect example of Chateauneuf. I mean, I can't remember the last time I drank a Chateauneuf because it's been killed off for me. It's actually the whole basis that I wrote The Battle for Wine and Love. Typicity was killed off by technology.
I'm going to see whether, actually, you wanted to say something. Jacques, vous aviez quelque chose à dire?
Oui, je suis d'accord avec Simon et Alice pour dire que les profils aromatiques actuels sont des concepts modernes. Et c'est une évolution qui a pas plus de 30 ans, quoi. C'est pas voilà.
I just wanted to make another point.
So I just want to say what Jacques said. Jacques is just repeating that he thinks this whole thing of typicity is something of the last 30 years. I personally would suggest that since we've had the
juste un instant pour relater mon histoire de vigneron. Moi, c'est moi qui ai amené le soufre et les levures à la maison.
Jacques is the person who actually goes to bring the sulfur and the yeast to the house.
Et après, le vin me plaisait plus du tout.
And the wine he didn't like the wine he was making.
Et j'ai voulu retrouver le vin tel que sans technologie, le vin du raisin.
And he wanted to actually go back to taste the wines without technology, that the wines that tasted from the grape.
Et c'est pour ça que nous nous sommes lancés dans cette aventure.
And that's why he started this adventure. I'd like to bring in Ray Isle from the States, another wine writer. Ray, how do you feel about this? Ray, where do you write for?
I write for, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I write for Food and Wine magazine here in the US. Known Alice a long time. You know, I think, hi Alice. It's interesting, just the specific debate about you know, sort of appellation identity and how you define it or don't define it, extending beyond natural wine. I mean, Alice does make a good point. Once you have a commercial wine that's so industrial that it can pass a test but has no typicity whatsoever, then you've kind of...
We've lost you, Ray.
Yep, still there?
We lost you a bit there. So.
Oh, sorry. I was saying that once you have a wine that's you know, essentially a manufactured wine that can pass a panel as typical, but actually has no real typicity to it, it's generic. You sort of lose the point of the whole pursuit of defining typicity by means of a panel. It's in terms of the earlier debate, you know, from Eric about whether natural wine should be codified or defined, you know, it's a tricky argument because the nature of the pursuit of natural wine is kind of innately against, you know, against codification. At the same time, you do worry that people will co-opt, you'll start seeing a 10 million bottle, quote unquote, natural wine produced by someone who just likes the name and thinks it'll sell.
Because we do have very large production biodynamic wines these days, despite the constraints there. I'd like to hear, Jacques, la production des vins, est-ce que vous avez une idée de la taille de la production potentielle d'un vin naturel? Est-ce que par exemple, les sociétés importantes puissent produire des quantités importantes de vin naturel, ou est-ce que ça doit être des petits domaines? So I'm asking whether a big company can actually produce natural wines, or does it have to be small domains? Allez-y, Jacques.
Oui, je pense on n'a pas statué sur ce débat.
They didn't
parce
do this.
que
They
ce
didn't get
n'était
into
pas-
that part of the conversation
Parce que ce n'était pas l'essence de notre syndicat.
because that wasn't the essence of their syndicate.
Mais néanmoins, je peux vous dire qu'avec des vendanges manuelles, déjà, ça va éliminer pas mal de monde.
So manual harvest would eliminate not quite a lot of people from
Les
doing this.
levures indigènes, la non-filtration, disons que ça va être extrêmement compliqué pour quelqu'un qui est industriel de faire cette chose-là.
So actually, using wild yeast and hand harvesting and so on would be difficult for a larger business potentially.
But however, they could always do, and any large company has the ability to do a small amount and call it a natural wine.
And now would
And have it be a natural wine.
Now, with the big question, and we've obviously, Philip Cox is in the audience, and he has done this in Romania, do we feel that there's anything wrong? Would there be anything wrong with a big company actually producing small amounts of natural wine if they fitted all of the criteria of this kind of charter? Jacques, est-ce que vous seriez contre une grosse société s'ils étaient capables de suivre les règles?
Personnellement, en tant qu'individu, oui.
And as an individual, he said, yeah.
Mais ce n'est pas l'objet de notre syndicat.
No, it's not the object of his. It's not the object of what he's trying to do.
De définir une taille d'un domaine.
That it wasn't in their plan to define the size of an estate or a producer. And so if somebody is capable of doing it larger, and there's a point that's been made, I think, by Felicity in the margin, saying that actually in a place like California where they are capable of doing large quantities of biodynamic, there's no reason necessarily why they wouldn't, if they can get the labor, actually make large quantities of natural wines as well. If Romania can do it, why can't anywhere else? And is this something we wouldn't want? Actually, can I bring you back? Can I bring Eric back on this? Eric, can I see you on this? I'm interested to know if you feel, because I've heard you talk about industrial wine on occasion, and I have the feeling that you're not entirely positive about that. How would you feel about a large company, I mean, potentially even a Gallo or whatever, actually producing natural wines in a smaller winery or a section of a winery, if they did adhere to rules like these?
Well, I think that would be a great thing for the planet, for sure. But I also think that the audience for natural wines is self-selecting. And when you have big corporate producers like Gallo adhering to a definition like that, you know, it makes you wonder who is being protected by these definitions. It just permits big companies to make wine, and of course that's good, but the people who really care about natural wines are not going to be attracted to those wines anyway. So,
but would it be a bad I mentioned the other day that I was in
no, I just said it would be a great thing.
Yeah, but no, sorry, my point is not for the planet. Would it be a good thing to actually introduce people? I think Felicity was talking about having natural wines already in Aldi supermarkets. Would it be a good thing to actually be introducing more people to a new experience?
No, because my guess would be that you would find very standardized wines, whether they're made according to those rules or not. I don't really believe in so-called introductory wines, in the sorts of wines that are often rationalized as drawing new consumers into the world of wine. I think there are good wines and there are not so good wines, and the better the wine, the better the introduction.
Okay, thank you, Eric. I think Ray had a point he wanted to say to actually answer one of the points you were making. Ray, come back in.
Yeah, what I was going to say was that I mean, it's interesting, you know, what I would guess would happen or be more likely to happen in the Gallo model would be basically what's happened with craft beer, which is the big producers initially tried to create sort of faux craft beers, which didn't work very well because it was partly because craft beer people transparently, it was transparent. They knew it was, Budweiser or whatever. And instead what's resulted is they've just bought up craft beer producers all over the country. And so you might see something like Gallo, just rather than trying to create their own natural wine label, they might just buy a domain or something like that.
But would that necessarily be if the wine actually did in a blind tasting, and if the production reflected the rules, and if in a blind tasting it tasted the way you'd expect it to, like a craft beer belonging to a big company, would that necessarily be a bad thing?
Well, it becomes more of a political question than a aesthetic or wine question in some ways. It's, it goes back to that, does natural wine have to be produced by, small independent people as opposed to large corporations? And that's I don't know if it's I honestly don't know. It might, as Eric said, it might be just good for the planet, period.
And there's a question, there are two things that have come up simultaneously. One is somebody has asked, I'm just who it is for a second, somebody has asked Alice to define a natural wine. Alice, would you like to do that? And I've got a supplementary question. I
define it all the time, but first I will do that. But I probably have a very controversial stance on industrial natural wine, as long as if Gallo would actually do a supermarket level natural wine, or I think that people who buy their wine in their supermarket deserve to have a natural wine, even if it's not the natural wine that I would drink. And I think that they're the people who could probably bring it out at $7, $8 a bottle. Those are not my readers or my drinkers. But I think there needs to be some just definable rules for that person, so they're not using brutal methods to make that natural wine. And so when we talk about a natural wine just being a wine without sulfur, that opens it up to all sorts of brutal methods. Now, as far as my version of natural wine, starts with organic viticulture and then nothing added, nothing taken away, except maybe minute of sulfur. And that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Then we drill down from there.
Oui, je voudrais intervenir à ce niveau de la discussion pour dire que du fait qu'il n'y a pas de définition, il n'y avait pas de définition.
If there's no definition, go on. Oui.
Les industriels se sont engagés dans cette démarche d'inonder, de faire des gros volumes
So without
vins
having a definition, that has actually made it possible for industrial producers to actually dive in.
Ils n'avaient de nature que le mot décrit sur l'étiquette.
Because all they had to do was use the word natural on the label, and there was nothing to stop them. Bien. I'm going to actually ask Birte Jantzen, who's a regular here, to say a few words, because you've got a question here. Birte's been with us several times. Go ahead, Birte, with your question, please.
Yes. Which one? The last one, or one of?
I think basically you're asking about the faultiness, or what you call when I buy natural apple juice.
Yes. So I was wondering. Something that is puzzling me. I taste around 5,000 wines a year on my tours during the vineyards, and I have every kind of wine. What you would consider as industrial wine down to really, really natural wine. And I was really wondering all the time about natural wine. Why should I accept a defect? I mean, when I buy, for example, natural apple juice, I want it to taste like the purest apple I can get, vibrant, and really as if I bite in a fresh apple. It's the same for all drinks that are unaltered, that come out of a natural producing. So when it comes to wine, suddenly this, what would I say, exigence, I don't know how to say this.
This demand
suddenly fades, and the consumer is supposed to accept a certain amount of defects, like wine starting to re-ferment in the bottle, like more volatile acidity, like mouse on a higher level, not on a low level. And I don't speak about reduction because yes, sure, reduction is going away. I did not yet find the right way of getting really peace with natural wine, because basically what I understand from all these discussions is that if I don't understand the defect, I'm a bad taster, or I don't understand natural wine. But natural wine for me should be the most vibrant, the most elegant, the most fine expression of what a fruit can express, and not the defect that the fruit can express through fermentation and through the way elaborating wine, through maybe less protection or something like that. I'm for wines with very low sulfur, but this does not mean that I want to accept defects.
Thank you, Birte. Thank you. I think that's going to take Emma a minute or two to translate, I imagine. I think there's quite a lot there, but I think it's a very interesting point, and it's something that I personally do get very annoyed by when I've had sommeliers particularly giving me a wine with a lot of Brett, or indeed VA, and saying this is the way wine should taste. And indeed, I've been told that Brettanomyces is a good terroir, which in my experience, Brett will make wine taste the same wherever it comes from. Jacques, allez-y.
Oui, je vois bien la chose. Alors, il est clair que pour le syndicat des vins nature,
It's
nous
clear
ne
for
faisons
the
pas de
syndicate
dégustation.
of natural wines.
Nous ne faisons pas de dégustation.
We don't do tastings.
Elles sont faites dans le cadre réglementaire de la législation en vigueur pour le vin en France.
Those tastings are done by the French laws, the French rules.
Après, c'est clair que, et là je parle en mon nom propre,
He's speaking for himself here.
C'est aussi, je pense, l'expression du groupe que nous étions pour créer ce syndicat.
But he thinks he does express what the group thinks, but he is speaking for himself here.
Nous défendons des vins nature, quitte à ce que certaines choses puissent paraître comme des défauts.
We're defending our wines. If there are things that may appear as faults,
mais tout en gardant une impression enfin disons l'émotion du vivant à la dégustation.
So there has to be what he calls l'émotion du vivant, the living, the emotion of feeling something alive at the tasting.
Also, like,
okay,
there's
thank
something, you know, there's douchebaggery on any level of wine business. And to say that there's no douchebaggery in natural wine would be disingenuous. Because
Alice, I'm going to leave Emma the challenge of translating dishbaggery.
And so
how would you how would you explain dishbaggery for Emma? Douchebaggery. Sorry.
Yeah,
yes, okay. So bad behavior.
Bad behavior. The bad behavior in a lot of wine professionals, and I know that Denmark was certainly en masse was guilty of this a while back in the early days of accepting natural wine, and so are some vignerons and some, you know, and some people all around the world. The new enthusiasts, most likely, and I think as natural wine grows up, that will not be accepted. There are people who absolutely walk in and want the craziest, most fucked up wine they can have, and they love it. And are you saying that they shouldn't have it?
Thank you, Eric. You've got a comment. I think you put your hand up.
I guess I would use the term defensiveness.
Okay.
You know,
sure.
Rather than douchebaggery, but there has been a lot of defensiveness about faults in natural wine. Partly as a result of being so widely attacked by wine authorities. And I think as I talk to people who I consider really good natural wine producers, there's a growing intolerance of these sorts of faults. But more important, I think, is to understand that we all accept a tremendous amount of faults in mainstream wine because we don't recognize them as faults. And if we start thinking about as Jacques said, the lack of emotion, the lack of a living quality in these wines, the lack of purity, there are a lot of faults in mainstream industrial wines that we should recognize if we could recognize if we opened our eyes to them. So the point ultimately is that every genre of wine has its faults, and most smart consumers would look for examples without faults.
Okay, I think that's going to be a question of how we define fault, obviously, but thank you for that, Jacques. Thank you for that, Eric. I've got a question that I want to throw in from Adam Vignola. Can you make a natural wine with screw caps? Do you have to use a natural cork? Alice, if you want to have an answer on that?
I've got an
Don't
answer
think
on
you
that.
need an. You can make a natural wine and put a Stelvin on it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Simon, you had a feeling?
No, I was visiting a producer. I'll say just the other day. Actually, of course, it was 3 weeks ago. I think it was the last point that I had a chance to visit anyone. But yeah, there's a favorite winemaker of mine in Slovenia actually bottles all of his extremely natural, no sulfur wines under screw cap. So yeah, I think closure is a.
Could I just chip in and say,
it's a different topic. Yeah.
One of the things I really do feel is if producers are going to make zero sulfur or low sulfur wine, the worst thing they can do, and some of them do, and not filter it and not fine it, is putting it in a clear glass bottle with a natural cork, to me, is doing no favors to the wine or indeed the person buying that wine. I don't like clear glass on any wine, but at least if it's had some kind of protective measures applied to it before it went in the clear glass, it may survive. But I think that a zero or low sulfur wine is potentially a fragile product, and both clear glass and corks will make it more vulnerable. Jacques, vous avez quelque chose à dire? Jacques? Non?
Non, j'avais rien. Je suis d'accord avec ce qu'il dit.
And sorry, are you, Simon, you were saying something there, were you?
I wasn't, but sorry, I had various things I wanted to say, but
we'll go ahead quickly while we're looking at another question quickly.
No, it's something. I think there's more to say about Felicity's question about bigger wineries making a natural wine. I think people might be surprised if they know the huge variety in size difference between many popular wineries in the natural space. I mean, this is not a black and white question. I'm curious what people think is a big winery or a small winery. I mean, look at somebody like Gernot Heinrich in Burgenland, 500,000 bottles a year, all biodynamic, wonderful range of skin fermented, no sulfur orange wines. I mean, is that a big winery or a small winery? Of course, it's not the size of Gallo, but I think we're talking about a set of philosophies or techniques, and I think they can be applied at any size if you've got the guts to do it. So I think this question of size it interests me.
This gives me an opportunity to, I hope, I don't know if you can see this bottle, if I pick it up. Basically, I've got a bottle, can you see it?
No, it's being
there we go, it kind of went there. It's basically
it's Vinoterra.
Vinoterra 2012 Kisi.
Very good example also with a...
And that's not a small winery in Georgia, but it's a very nice orange wine.
400,000 bottles a year of Qvevri wines now.
Yes. So, but they are Qvevri. They do apply the rules, if you like.
Yeah.
So, did somebody else have their hand up there? Alice, were you saying something? I think.
No.
I think.
I don't know.
Holly, would you like to chuck something in? We are 12 minutes over. It's been a fascinating conversation. I think we're probably coming to an end. Would you like to throw something in?
Well, I have questions, but I also have so many questions from the audience that haven't been answered or addressed yet. So I feel like I'm going to pass that over. Okay. It came up several times. How do we deal with communication confusion around natural equals more healthy? Is this something that we need to address as part of a movement that has adopted language that can be that can be used to promote alcohol as a healthy choice at any time?
We'll wait for Jack to get that translated. Alice, why don't you chip in on that first?
No, I think it's ridiculous to promote wine as a healthy beverage. It's a beverage that I love to drink. It is perfectly healthy for me, but I think it's irresponsible to
Thank
say
you for saying that.
Yeah, it's a false position.
Jacques, est-ce que l'idée de promouvoir le vin naturel en tant que vin sain, est-ce que c'est quelque chose de souhaitable ou pas?
Oui. Oui, c'est souhaitable. Oui.
C'est souhaitable.
Et, oui.
De dire que les vins naturels soient plus sains que les autres.
Bien sûr.
So Jacques
well,
says,
yeah,
yes,
I would agree with him too.
He's saying
that it's more healthy for you.
Of course, it's worth saying it's more healthy.
Yes, more healthy.
But the question is, est-ce que le vin soi-même est sain en produit? Est-ce qu'il y a des dangers de faire ce genre de promotion?
On connaît tous les dangers de l'addiction. Hein.
We all know the dangers of addiction. So,
mais au-delà de ça, si le vin est comment dire, forcément un produit qui est sain autrement.
But otherwise, wine is by its very nature a healthy product. Polly, you've
Alors,
got
je voulais juste intervenir là, au stade de la discussion où nous sommes pour dire que dans notre défi de vin nature, il y a aussi des choses qui sont profondes.
In what we're looking for in terms of natural wine, there is something profound.
C'est d'éliminer dans le stade de production de notre aliment, je considère le vin comme un aliment.
To eliminate one of the stages in what is actually a food product.
D'abord la chimie de synthèse.
A synthetic.
Et ensuite ne travailler qu'avec les processus naturels.
And just to work with natural processes. Bien, merci.
Et de cette manière, de s'inscrire parfaitement dans l'organisme agricole tel que l'a décrit Steiner et la biodynamie et toutes ces choses.
And to actually move within a form of agriculture as was defined by Steiner and others. Merci. Polly, you've got some more questions.
So I have my own personal question for the night, which is coming from a marketing standpoint. I think Robert has been really good with his opinions tonight. It did come up in some of the Q&A and threads, but I am not going to be so guarded with mine. Which is, as a wine marketer, I am hugely pro natural wines. I think that they represent a risk that a lot of wineries and winemakers are taking in an industry that is by and large incredibly risk averse. Do we have any instances where we can see business profiles, case studies, successes, financial information? We're very guarded with what we share in the wine industry that are being shared, made public, that can promote further taking of risks in many ways throughout our industry.
I can give you one, yeah.
Yep.
So a winery in the Mosel by the name of Staffelterhof. The winemaker is Jan Matthias Klein. It's a fun story because he inherited his family winery and it wasn't really a very strong business, and he tried to figure out what to do. And somewhere along the way, this is about 6-7 years ago, he realized there was this big discussion going on about natural wine, and he didn't really get it, but he saw that everyone was complaining that natural wines had faults. So he experimented and he made a natural wine, or he tried to make a wine with no additions at all. And his farming is organic, so he was doing everything that you should do. And it was small production. The wine sold out instantly. So the next year he made 2 wines without sulfur, without filtration, without yeast, etc., etc. Fast forward a few years, now more than half his production is a range of natural wines, which he markets completely separately to the classic wines that his family's always made. And he told me it's transformed his business. He now has new markets. He now has an importer in Japan, and suddenly he has a strong business on his hands because he's accessed a completely different market that he couldn't access before. So there you go. Success story by making natural wines.
Can I chip in on that? Because Felicity has just put in the chat column the fact if you click on Wine Business International, the magazine that both Felicity and I are involved with, you'll find the article that Simon wrote about that story. So you can actually read that at your leisure. And as Felicity said, it is a great article. I've just read that. Just before we've got, I mean, Polly, if you've got another question, there's a couple of people I just want to quickly invite to say a word or two. But Jacques, vous aviez quelque chose à dire?
No, c'est bon.
No? Polly, have you got another question, or can I pull in somebody?
Bring them in. This is for the audience. Bring them in.
We're over time, but I think it's been a great conversation. I've got Tanisha Townsend. Have you got any thoughts on this from your house arrest in Paris? Tanisha, are you there? I'll just see if I don't think I can unmute you, so maybe not. I'm going to actually take Tanisha up. I think what I have got is Rebecca Hopkins, who is now in Australia. Beck, would you like to chip in the marketing sense? Maybe I'm going to lose you. Not. Okay. There you go, Rebecca. Beck, are you there?
Hi, Robert. Good morning.
Hi. Good morning from you in Australia. How do you see, in terms of you've been working in the States, doing PR marketing for a range of very top producers from various countries. How do you see the natural wine side of things?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I really agree with Alice's comments regarding, Polly's comments regarding the industry being risk averse. And I think one of the great, certainly innovations in communications is definitely coming out of the natural wine movement. And, you know, to Alice's point, regardless of our personal choice of how we choose to define the category or what we prefer to drink, I think it's our job as a collective to educate as much as we can, you know, consumers about the category of natural wine, that is. I would say in the US, I can't speak for everybody. Obviously, it's an incredibly complex market that Alice knows incredibly well. But I do think there is middle ground, certainly, between the examples given of, you know, Gallo and the resources that they would have at their disposal to start to bring consumers into the conversation. And I think there are also a lot of, call them small to mid-sized producers that are applying a lot of the principles or the concepts of low input or natural that maybe don't fit what might be considered the current guardrails for, you know, the loyalists, dare I say it, of natural. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I think the interest in the non-conventional approach to wine is definitely at its highest. I think it's fitting into a social conscience around awareness of what people are, call it ingesting overall, and their overall interest in, you know, things that are suited to their lifestyles. So
I think that you're making a point that Eric made a couple of nights ago or a couple of days ago, which was that nothing has really had as big an effect on the wine industry in a long time. I think in my case, since the arrival of the New World, going back 30 or 40 years, nothing has really shaken up the wine industry as much as natural wines. And I'd like to chip in as well, having been very critical in the past of quite a lot of the wines that I saw in the natural wine movement. And one of the worst wines I've ever drunk in my life was a wine by Frank Cornelissen, which I feel I need to mention at this point. Those wines have improved. This is the point I'd like to make. The quality of the natural wines we're seeing today, when I go to exhibitions, is immeasurably better. The level of mousiness, the levels of Brett and so on are definitely, I'm just not seeing the amateur nature of natural wine that I used to see. And
Robert, he's not really that much natural anymore. That's probably why you like them.
Well, that possibly, that basically it was a wine that actually oxidized. It was in a clear glass bottle at the time. It oxidized literally in the glass in front of me, and that was not a wine that I think should did any favors to anyone. But I think that the quality of wines across the board, the wines that are keeping to the rules, has improved hugely. Simon, how do you feel about that? Because you and I did that trek around the Royal Wine Fair a few years ago.
It's difficult to say. I think there is shared learning in the natural wine world for sure, and there are people doing amazing things. At the same time, one thing I do see is that there is a younger generation of people who are just getting into winemaking. I meet people at wine fairs all the time, and I taste their wines, and I'm like, okay, you know, how long have you been making wine? Oh, this is the first vintage. Oh, do you have any winemaking experience? No. And you taste the wines. Sometimes they got lucky and they made something amazing. Sometimes it's a disaster. But I'm still happy. I'm happy that people of all ages, shapes, sizes, nationalities are excited and they want to get into this industry and they want to do something. And I'm also excited if that at least they start from caring about their environment and by what's going on in the vineyard. You know, it might take them a while to get it right. That's okay.
I think my only feeling is I just don't want a sommelier or anybody else patting them on the back for their first unsuccessful efforts any more than a restaurant cooking good ingredients badly because they haven't actually been to cookery school and they're just starting out with their cooking. I would expect a restaurant critic to call out that kind of restaurant, just as I'd expect a wine critic, wine writer to call out the unsuccessful amateur efforts.
Or maybe there is space there, or there are places, there are wine bars, should they ever open up again, where people are curious who is new and who is upcoming and not so good right now, but just watch this person because I got some chops. And there's a great joy in watching somebody grow up in wine. As long as that wine isn't too expensive, I'm willing to take a shot on that one.
Thank you, Alice. I think that's a very good point on which to finish. Jacques, Jacques, vous avez des derniers mots à dire parce qu'on va fermer, on va clôturer.
Ok, très bien. Je vous remercie d'abord pour cette réunion.
But thank you for the meeting.
Et je pense que tous les acteurs doivent participer à leur manière pour que nous puissions continuer à boire suffisamment de vin nature.
So everyone's really got together so we can drink enough good wine. I'd like to thank, before I thank everybody, before I thank the panel, I'd like to thank Emma, because none of us can see Emma, but I know she's been doing a heroic job in the background, giving Jacques the translation into French of what we're all saying.
Merci Emma. Merci Emma.
Thank you, Emma, and Emma for stepping in to do this quite late on in the piece. Merci Jacques infiniment. J'apprécie beaucoup. Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Simon. And thank you, Eric's gone, but thank you, Ray, and everybody else who's participated. And I apologize to anybody whose questions were not answered. Thank you, Polly, for trying to get them all answered. We are tomorrow night doing something very different. We're looking at wine data. We're looking at all of the research into who is drinking what and liking what and so on. And obviously natural wine fits into that picture. Next week, we are still defining what we're going to do, but we're going to be looking at sustainable wines. We're going to do a number of subjects. So firstly, do go onto the website and subscribe so we can tell you what's on. Please send us some emails telling us what you'd like us to be covering, because literally we're making this up as we go along. And please also do take a look, if you haven't already, go on to the YouTube site, because Polly's been doing a huge amount of work to get I think almost all of the recordings we've done, the webcasts we've done, they're all up there, I think, except one. So please go on there and subscribe there. And thank you for helping, all of you, participants and panelists alike, for making this work. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening, wherever you are, and take care.